Welcome to our new public affairs show, Morgantown Today. During this show, we'll bring you a behind-the-scenes look into the issues that matter most to you, our viewer. I'm your host, Taylor Hall.
And I'm Natalie Comer. Each week, we will tackle a different topic, and our guests on our show will be the decision makers who make an impact on the Morgantown community.
Morgantown Today will also address matters of public policy and interest, including topics on education, culture, and politics. This show is made possible through a partnership between the City of Morgantown and the WVU Reed College of Media.
Today, we'll be discussing the impact the coronavirus disease is having on food insecurity within our own community. During this pandemic, supplies for food banks are limited, as 1 in 4 Americans across the country are skipping meals or counting on food donations to feed their families.
That's right, Natalie. Since February of this year, almost 30% of Americans report they or a family member has skipped meals or relied on charities to get groceries.
Food insecurity is when you don't have access to enough food for an active, healthy lifestyle. Before the pandemic, West Virginia had a food insecurity rate of 15.3%, but that number is projected to increase to 19.3% during this pandemic.
Joining us today in the studio to discuss how our own community is fighting back against food insecurity is Monongalia County Commissioner and Executive Director of the Pantry Plus More, Tom Bloom. Thanks for joining us, Commissioner Bloom.
Good morning, Taylor. Good morning, Natalie.
Commissioner Bloom has served as the County Commissioner since 2012 and the Executive Director of Pantry Plus More for 4 years. He co-founded Pantry Plus More in 2016 and since then has distributed over $90,000 worth of food among 13 schools in Monongalia County.
Bloom, thanks for joining us during this pandemic, even if it means we have to socially distance in our studio. Could you tell us a little more about food insecurity in Morgantown?
I think one of the problems we're now having is that because people see us as the #1 economic county in West Virginia and we're so successful, people do not realize there's a story within a story. The big story is that 4,700 students 4,700 students are needing funds for food. But here's the big thing, 2,300 students are food insecure. That is an enormous amount. That's 17% of the population in Monongalia County. Along with that, you then have 62% of the families do not qualify because they're above the federal rate. And that's the area that we need to hit. And as everyone sees Cheat Lake or sees Lakeview or sees Suncrest, they don't realize this is another part of our community that we need to help.
How is food insecurity in Morgantown similar or different to the rest of the state, Commissioner Bloom?
As I said, one of the big problems is because everyone sees that we're doing so well economically, people forget there is a large segment of population that is here that needs our help. And unfortunately, no one realizes that because they don't want to know about it. I think that's the bottom line. And what we are seeing is in the school system a serious problem. When COVID hit, it's even worse because we're having a lot more families that are not working or able to work, and they're not being able to provide food for their children.
What are some ways that Mon County combats food insecurity?
Well, one of the big things that we have now done is that the Pantry Plus More program, we'll talk about that later, we have 12 food school pantries. And one of the things we're trying to do is get the food to the children. The problem is when the schools are closed, we have to come up with some innovative ways of getting food to them. And that's one of the things we'll talk about as this program goes on.
So when I was on your Facebook page and the Facebook page of the Pantry Plus More, I was so surprised by how many people in Morgantown lined up for food donations. What resources are available to those who suffer from food insecurity? Is there a website or telephone number they can call?
Well, first of all, United Way has 12 different food pantries, so you can call them, or we have a Pantry Plus More program. The key thing is that we need to get food to our children. And one of the things we work with a lot of different groups, and one of the things that I like is David Goldberg, the CEO of Mon Health, says food is medicine, and that's one of the areas that we're trying to do. We're talking about an enormous amount of food that we have to bring in. For example, once a month, we do food drives and we bring out 15,000 pounds of produce. Then another once a month, we bring the food that goes directly to the schools and the produce. And then we have additional programs that our outreach facilitators do and make personal deliveries.
Commissioner Bloom, unemployment rates rose higher in just 3 months of COVID-19 than it did in 2 years of the Great Recession. How have the 12 food banks in Morgantown been able to keep up with the demand of food with so many residents unemployed?
Well, to be very honest, we haven't. And one of my frustrations is you would think that many of these food banks would stay open during this time period, and they haven't. So it's put a big pressure on United Way and the Pantry Plus More, and basically we're seeing so many more people showing up to our food giveaways. Mountaineer Food Bank can only do so much, and I'm very concerned that we're not reaching everyone, and we're such a large county. What we try and do is when we do one of these once a month food giveaways, we try and do it throughout the county so we can address that problem.
So even now, the COVID-19 outbreak has left more than 30 million Americans jobless. That number was around 6 million in February. That doesn't even take into account the stressors of children being homeschooled, parents being furloughed, or working from home. So this pandemic has affected everyone in some way. How have you seen companies and individuals step up and help out during this pandemic in our own community?
Well, one thing I could really say is that we couldn't do it without the different companies and community members coming in. For example, when we do a food giveaway, there's Dan Brewster, we call him the Brew Crew from WVU, and his medical brigade. They come and volunteer and give out the food. We have different companies that volunteer, give funding, Mon Health. There's just been an amazing, number of companies that realize that this is not an issue that is political. It's not Democratic, it's not Republican, it's not independent. And the whole concept we're trying to do is give our children a fair chance so that they don't have to worry about where their next meal's coming from or where am I going to get food for my younger brother and sister. And imagine that, and that's the kind of problems we're dealing with in the schools.
I was looking through your social media on Facebook, as I had previously mentioned, and you are very active, by the way, always on the front lines of these regular food drives, and it was inspiring to see all the Bloom news related to food drives and food brigades. Can you tell us a few inspiring stories that have been as a result of the food drives? We could all use some good news right now, Commissioner Bloom.
Let me give one that really can connect with WVU. We had the fraternities and sororities 2 years ago volunteer to do a food drive, and they went out on High Street and they went around to the different fraternities and sororities and brought them food. It was about 5 o'clock on the courthouse square when a little young girl started walking by with her dad. She was in dirty pajamas. We could tell that she was homeless. As she walked by, she saw a shampoo bottle with a dancer on it. So she walked over, she looked down and picked it up. I said, "Would you like it?" And she nodded because she wouldn't say anything. And then everyone started watching her, and I said, "Would you like a bunch of toiletries to take home?" We gave her a box, literally, of just, shampoo, lotions. And as she was running back to her dad with the box, the dad was crying, and the girl said, "This is the greatest day of my life. This is better than my birthday." And that moment, I could look around and see the WVU students saying, "Wow, we're making a difference." And that's the kind of thing. I'll give one other incident that really bothers me. For example, when the Pantry Plus More, we came up with the idea, Rourke Sizemore and I came up with this idea, and as we chose the two schools, we went to South Middle School, and we believed the students should be running the pantries. This one young lady came up and said, "Well, I see food, but where are the personal hygiene items?" And Rourke and I, being male, said, "What are you talking about?" Said, "I have friends who miss school because they give out one tampon for 5 days." And just that concept, it just blows my mind. We need to work together to help these students have a fighting chance. And the key thing, what we're saying is with the Pantry Plus More program, what we have done is we've put the school pantries, the food right there, so the kids don't have to worry about transportation. We have two simple rules. The rules are that we keep it open all day during school and any student can get it. And keeping their dignity and the stigma of not being able to eat is really disconcerting to me and the community. And this community has come together and said, we're not going to allow that.
It gives all of us hope when we hear these stories of our community coming together to help each other, especially when the number of people on our own state who struggle with hunger is so high, Commissioner Bloom. I was shocked to discover that more than 250,000 residents in the Mountain State don't have enough food to eat. And of that amount, 1 in 5 are children. With so many schools online now, how important is it to ensure that every resident in our community has access to the food that they need for their families?
I think the key is being flexible and working with the community. For example, as I said, we do once a month programs, but we do every Saturday. We give out 400 boxes of food. We have what's called outreach facilitators. We're very lucky in Mon County. They are in 23 schools. They come back to us and get the 20 most needed individuals. We don't just leave it somewhere, they take it to the house. Also, by taking it to the house, we then start opening communications to see what kind of problems are. Is there broadband? Is there child abuse going on? So it opens up so many doors. But the key thing is this that I want the public to understand. All we ask is give these children a fighting chance. And the bottom line is, if they don't have to worry about food, then they can study, they can go to school, they cannot cause other problems. And that's one of the things we've noticed is how it's affected the school community.
Let's be honest, the cost of food just keeps rising. In West Virginia alone, it's reported that nearly $115,000 in food each year is what is needed in our state to ensure that no family goes hungry. As a Mon County Commissioner and the Executive Director of the Pantry Plus More, is the city and the organization prepared to deal with the high demand of food that is needed as massive job losses are expected to continue? Can you explain how you are preparing on both fronts?
One of the things that you had mentioned earlier was that with 12 schools, it's roughly $10,000 to put in a pantry. So that's $120,000. With the schools being closed, we have to come up with another way of funding it. For example, when you had asked before, we have Sam's Club, Panera's, Kroger's donate twice a week to offset some of the food. One of the big problems we're having is we can give them the food, but what we have learned is that sometimes we give them healthy food, they don't know what to do with it. We started seeing them throw it away. So what we have now done is modify and work with different agencies to teach them how to make meals with the produce and the food that we're doing. The bottom line is we could not do this. We're looking at $100,000 to $150,000 every year to help feed the kids just to get them so they're like everybody else. And it's a very difficult part. With the COVID funds, what we did was the City of Morgantown, the County Commission, donated a lot of funds. I will say this, I'm very upset that the governor decided that this money wasn't reimbursable. That's what COVID funds are for, and it's something that really bothers me. How could you not reimburse food for the children? And that's something that we are fighting right now, and you'll hear more about.
Commissioner Blue, we have also seen the impact that COVID-19 has had on our transportation system. Back in April, Morgantown received almost $8 million from a federal grant to respond to the challenges within our public transportation system related to the pandemic. How has that grant helped residents who rely on buses to go to the grocery store?
That's a great question, because what we have done is when we do these mobiles, we put it by a bus stop so they can use it. We've talked with the bus service, and they make sure that they run extra runs wherever our program's going to be. The other thing is we've had it go out so that they can come by where our supply room is, because many people, we've had people come, show up with a suitcase. We fill up the suitcase and we get them back on the bus and they go home. So there's a real correlation between transportation and getting the food. One of the problems we were having in this outlying area is not everyone is able to get the transportation, and we are working on getting to those individuals. It's not easy, and that's where we've asked for volunteers in the community who will drive that food to those people's houses.
Commissioner Bloom, with Mon County COVID-19 numbers hovering between orange and red, students are currently all learning remotely. I know that you do a lot of work getting food to children in need. Research shows that 20% of children in Mon County go to bed hungry. Can you talk a little bit about if the county is providing students with free or reduced meals during remote learning, and how are they going about this?
This is another one of my frustrations. Because the school system isn't really good at this, they are making sandwiches available at the schools for pickup. But if you don't have transportation, it doesn't do any good. It's like having doctors 2 miles away. They have all the equipment, but if you can't get to the doctor, you're not helping them. So that's one of the things was a concern. But these outreach facilitators now, the school system is allowing them to work with us to get food to those individuals. Also, every Saturday, we have at our supply center at 9 Rouse Drive, we offer food and deliveries to those students. So that is one of the ways we're working with the school system. But it is very difficult. It's all new to us, and I'm very concerned that there's a segment of the population that we're missing, and I'm worried about that.
I understand that before COVID, about 40% of Mon County students were receiving free or reduced lunch in school. How do students qualify for these free or reduced meals during this pandemic?
Wow, that's another good question. One of the problems is It's really confusing, and if you're not really used to the government system and you follow through, it may take 3 to 5 weeks to qualify. We were trying to fill that void during that time. It's basically made on family income, but the problem is if you're off or furloughed for 4 or 6 weeks, there becomes a lot of discrepancy on what you can and can't get.
What inspired you to be one of the founders of Pantry Plus More? And could you describe your mission?
Rourke Sizemore was a student of mine at Morgantown High School, and he and his group of basketball players, the community group, did Sunday food programs at the churches. I was invited there, and I think everything turned around when we were there, and one of his friends that he did not realize who was in his class brought his little sister. They were homeless, and they walked in and didn't realize that. So with that concept, he then did a program on a mentorship with me as a county commissioner. We saw something in the Facebook about school supply rooms, and we thought, well, we would try it. And we basically had only 2. We had it at Mason-Dixon and South, and from there, what happened was we would order the food, and I have to say this too, I'm very excited about WVU student government. They were dealing with some issues, and they needed some good PR. They heard about our program. They were the first group that offered $3,000, helped us order the food, and out of the trunks of our cars, we were delivering the food to the schools. Because of that, the program got larger. The student government got involved. Then other schools heard about it. So basically, it really, the satisfaction of seeing a child when we were at Eastwood, the boy, we handed him a package of personal hygiene items. He pulls out a toothbrush. This is a 4th grader. Looks at us and says, do you know this will be the first toothbrush I've ever had that I didn't have to share with my 2 sisters? And then you realize what you're really doing and having the impact. And I think, you know, this is an issue that we all know what it's like to be hungry. And I think it's really important. And again, I can't say enough about the WU student government who got it started. Then the public got involved. Then the schools got involved. The county commission got involved. Everyone's helping out. And I think that's the only way we're going to resolve this issue.
It's really inspiring to hear all those stories. And you must be very proud of the accolades the Pantry Plus More has received. The program was in the national spotlight during the West Virginia Teacher Walkout and was the recipient of the National Association of Counties Achievement Award in the category of children in 2018. How do you feel knowing this one program you helped start has been recognized on such a huge platform?
I have to admit, that's one of the greatest excitements I've had when I had friends of mine who were teachers in California, Philadelphia, call me, said, we heard about your program when the teachers were on strike, and you worked with the parents, you worked with the teachers to get food out so that wouldn't stop. How did you do it? And I talk about the students at Clay Patel High School who drove over to Beulah Church, said, I know of 5 children who are on my bus that are not getting food, and they became a part of it. It became a community organization that no matter whether you supported the teachers or not, we were getting the food to the kids. And my greatest thing I watch now is when people in other teachers in other states say, you don't want me to go West Virginia on you. And it's a positive statement of real positive for what teachers do besides just teach. We want to help them overall in all areas, and food insecurity is #1 priority for me in this county.
I know it may sound cliche, Commissioner Bloom, but during these difficult times, we're really all in this together. Why do you think it's more important than ever before for people to help their neighbors, their community, and to volunteer for causes like Pantry Plus More?
I think the key thing is that everyone understands what it's like to be hungry and not have enough money to buy food. We'll have people come up and say, because you gave us this food, I can now buy medicine for my child's diabetes program. Or now I can buy some medicine for my handicapped child. So it makes more sense. The other thing that we also noticed is if you're hungry, you don't have people monitoring and watching what's going on, you get yourself in trouble. We've noticed there's a great correlation between hunger and breaking and enterings. We've noticed at the school, we've seen a lowering of fights at the school. We've seen test scores go up. And that's because they're treating each other as human beings and understand the concerns. And that's what food insecurity can do. All these kids want to do is not be different. They want to be able, and one more, I have to tell you this one story. When we came up with the food banks and we put them in the schools, the teachers wrote to said, it wasn't that we all have snack time. And they would say, okay, 4 of the students didn't have snacks. The teacher would have to pull out some lifesavers and hand something out. She said, now what we can do is go to the supply storage room, get the food, so when they announce it's snack time, that child can look around the room like everyone else and say, look, I have food too. They're not different. And that is such a powerful tool when you're in education. Being same and being equal and being able to eat just like everyone else. And you can see I get a little worked up about it because that is what we have to do, working together. I mean, I was in the WVU marching band 6 years, and if one person was a weak link, we all worked together so they would be stronger. That's what we need to do in the schools, and that's what we're teaching to kids. We had I apologize, I keep having stories. Brookhaven, what the counselor called in a student who was a very wealthy student, said, I'm upset that you're taking food out of the pantry. And the child crying said, I'm taking it from my best friend who doesn't have any food. So we were teaching them the skills that, the counselor was like, called me up and said, I really screwed up. But you did. They got to see how it's working, and that's what I'm asking this community. They see it works in the schools, they see it works in the community, and we need to work together.
And I saw on your website that you currently have 4 volunteer committee member positions open for Pantry Plus More. We are putting the information to apply for these positions up on your screen, or if you just want to volunteer or donate to this all-volunteer organization. I
really appreciate that, and it really shows that you've done your homework. It is really important for the public to know that we're all volunteer, there's no money going to administration, and I really appreciate you bringing up that point.
Thank you, Commissioner Bloom, for visiting our TV studio today and raising awareness on such an important issue that many of us take for granted, a full fridge or a stocked pantry. That wraps up this edition of Morgantown Today. I'd like to once again thank our guest, Monongalia County Commissioner and Executive Director of Pantry Plus More, Tom Bloom. I'm your host, Natalie Comer. And I'm Taylor Hall. This show is made possible through a partnership between the City of Morgantown and the WVU Reed College of Media. It's taped at the WVU Waterfront TV studio. Thanks for joining us here on Morgantown Today.